Ghost of a Memory by Phoenix Boy. Chapter 9. On October 15th, 2 days before the opening of the Harry Potter Day festivities, the professors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry met in the staff room for a last meeting about the coming event. Most of them looked bored. The formula for the 3 days was the same every year, only the speakers varying, and all of them except for James had run through it many times already.
Although the holiday opens on the 17th,
Albus began,
our first guests start arriving tomorrow. The majority will be housed in the South Tower. The house elves have a complete list of the residents of each room. There are a few exceptions. My brother, who has decided to honor us with his presence this year, since he no longer has a student, will be resident in the dungeons, in the 2-bedroom suite on the same corridor as Severus and James's rooms. He will share it with the university media representative. I don't know if Claudius will accompany him this year, but I'm sure we can provide any facilities he requires.
James snickered slightly at the exasperated look on the headmaster's face as he continued.
Of course, should anyone happen to find out my brother's secret, you will tell me, won't you? Since our guests start arriving from tomorrow evening, we will all have to wear our graduation robes. James, you do have yours with you, don't you?
Yes, Albus.
Excellent. Now, as to seating arrangements.
Severus is younger than me, Professor Sinistra interrupted quickly.
I am well aware of that. As usual, the youngest 2 professors will have to be seated with the students for the 4 days to make room for the Minister of Magic and our guest speakers at the head table. This year, that will mean Severus as usual. And James, do either of you object?
Would it make any difference if we did? Severus asked rhetorically. No, I have no problem with that arrangement. I am sure the conversation on offer will be fascinating.
James?
Fine by me.
Thank you. On the 17th, for Muggle parents and those who haven't had the opportunity to see Hogwarts before, the guided tours will operate from 10 o'clock until lunchtime. The prefects are as always in charge of those. In the afternoon, the memorial service will begin at 2 o'clock on the Quidditch pitch, that being the only location large enough to seat our normal audience. That evening, the house elves will prepare a banquet for us. Are there any questions about that?
Albus, how many times have we done this? Minerva asked. He shifted uncomfortably.
On the second day, the workshops and speakers will be throughout the day. Again, that requires very little organization from us. On the third day, we have the speeches about Harry by some of his friends during the morning from 10 o'clock. The afternoon contains the highlight of the 3 days, the Quidditch match. The balls will be released at 3 o'clock. Rolanda, how is your team getting on?
The Quidditch coach smirked. As well as they always do. We have some excellent players this year.
James, still confident?
Of course. My team is unbeatable. Who is your team? The opposing coach demanded. That's for me to know and you to find out 5 minutes. If you get them with it, you don't waste any unnecessary energy, but if you don't, they'll underestimate you. Only if you don't know them, of course. It would be far more sensible to start with a powerful strike, though. one of the others started enthusiastically. "You're likely to catch them before they're as ready as they would be later on in the beginnings when you have the most energy behind it." "And of course," Archie said scornfully, "by the time you're halfway through the duel, you'll be exhausted." "Perhaps," James said, thinking about it. "It's certainly a good point, but for it to be effective, you'd have to be certain you would actually take them out on the first strike, wouldn't you? That technique's a bit better in a combat situation, though it takes less time and energy if it works." "What are you debating about?" Severus said from behind him. James looked around, startled, as the man, also wearing the green robes of a Merlin House graduate, stepped easily over the bench and sat down next to him. "The best opening moves in a duel. Personally, I find the best method is avoiding being in a dueling situation in the first place, although it certainly has its place. If there's an alternative, such as a group attack on a target, or using explosive potions, it's best to take it." "Yes, but what's your move if you were in a duel, sir?" someone asked. "If I did have a standard opening move, which I don't, do you think I'd tell people about it? I doubt Professor Evans has told you his." James laughed and continued to discuss the place and time for each technique. "I find in a real combat situation, I like to obliterate my opponent as quickly as possible. Severus, do you have any burn potion on you?" "Yes. Why?" James concentrated and brought up a laser-like beam of bright white light streaming out from a tiny point on his palm. "What's that?" Archie asked, fascinated. "Pure magic. Magic so raw that it's near uncontrollable," James said quietly, and the ray vanished. "Can I have the potion now, please?" "For what?" "I've got a blister." "You want me to give you burn potion for a blister? A very nasty, very painful blister that won't go away unless I put some burn salve on it." Severus rolled his eyes and handed James a small vial of potion. "First few times I tried that, I hadn't got the hang of keeping it down to a small area, and I burned half the skin off my body. It still hurts like anything to use it, but no shield works against it, and it takes huge power to summon it in the first place. I never use this unless my life is threatened. It's too dangerous." Just then, the main doors opened, and an old man swept in. He was very tall, very old. His silvery white beard and hair were long, and his blue eyes twinkled behind half-moon glasses. He, too, wore a green robe, but his was plain green, with no trim, no colored lining. He was Aberforth Dumbledore, housemaster of Merlin and James's mentor. He looked it, too. At first glance, he appeared to be without Claudius. James was out of his seat like a shot and bounding towards him. Aberforth ruffled his hair affectionately, James scowling at him for doing this in front of his students. A quick handshake, and then Abe turned back towards the door.
"Claudius!" he shouted. "Hurry up! And don't you dare muck up any of Albus's floors. The house elves have quite enough work to do without you adding to it."
Everyone stared at the door. Was Claudius some great but eccentric wizard? A giant? A goblin? A house elf? Dragon? Basilisk? Griffin? Hippogriff? A few moments later, a very grumpy, coal-black, common goat marched sullenly into the hall. "Hello, Claudius," James said, smiling. Aberforth's pet goat was notorious, not only for the inappropriate charms cast on it, but also within the university for its terrible temper. It was rumored to be worse than Voldemort on a bad day, or at least it would be if it were human. Claudius graced him with a contemplating look, seeming to lighten to a slightly paler shade of grey.
"James,"
Albus said as they neared the staff table,
"would you show Aberforth down to his rooms? Abe, where do you want Claudius? Could Rubius possibly... Of course. I'll come by your rooms later. Catch up. I'll even bring you some lemon drops." Thank you, Albus. Shall we go, Jamie boy?"
James sighed, shook his head, and led the way out. Would the man ever remember that he was a fully trained, fully qualified adult and a teacher, too? After they left the hall, James led Aberforth down the now familiar passages to the isolated corridor where his rooms were located. Claudius, meanwhile, was led off as grumpily as usual by Hagrid, who was thrilled to have a new creature to look after. As soon as they were inside, Aberforth looked at James.
"So, how are you getting on?"
"Oh, fine."
"And?"
"And what?" James asked innocently.
"How are you getting along with everyone?"
"Quite well. Minerva has been very helpful, especially in the first few weeks while I was still finding my feet."
"You know quite well that's not what I meant. What's your love life like?"
"Abe!" James exclaimed, completely embarrassed, though not at all surprised. It was the sort of question he was coming to expect from either of the Dumbledore brothers. I'm in a school. What do you expect?
Non-existent, then. Such a shame. I'll have to talk to Albus, find someone you might get on with. I'm sure he'll know all of the eligible young men around the nosy youngster.
Thanks, Abe, James said, making an effort to be polite despite the obvious attempts to wind him up. I'm fine, really. And I don't have much time for social life anyway. It's a hard job, very challenging. I keep very long hours. And of course I've got to look out for my Slytherins in the evening. Some of them get homesick, you know.
Calm down, Jamie. I wouldn't do that, really. You know that. At least I won't bother discussing it with Albus. He never did have any sense. You'd better go back up again now, hadn't you? You've still got to finish your dinner. Make sure you eat your beans. I remember the Hogwarts elves being very good at them.
James pulled a face, laughed, and went back upstairs again. Just as he was passing through the small antechamber that the teachers usually use to get in and out of the hall without passing through the main doors, he was stopped by Minerva and led off into a corner where Severus was waiting.
What is it?
The goat, Minerva said urgently. What did Professor Dumbledore do to it?
Abe, you mean?
I'm not sure I can tell you. I mean, he didn't seem that keen on his brother knowing now, did he?
We aren't his brother,
Severus pointed out smoothly, and I give you my solemn word I will not speak a word of this conversation to Albus.
Fine,
James said, grinning. It's not like it's anything important. All he did was charm Claudius so that he changed color depending on his mood. Problem is, Claudius is so depressed, he's never anything but black anyway.
That's all?
Minerva asked incredulously.
Yes.
What did you think it was? He asked impishly. Severus quickly put a hand over his mouth. Minerva was blushing. Merlin, even Severus was slightly flushed.
I think Minerva would prefer not to embarrass herself further, he said quickly.
James laughed.
Don't worry, I know what you thought. It's what everyone does.
It's the wording, isn't it?
Inappropriate charms on a goat. Honestly, couldn't they come up with a more exact definition? Believe me though, living with a goat isn't fun.
It smells, even with cleaning charms, and Abe takes Claudius everywhere, literally. The idea is that if he ever does to something interesting, Abe's there to take notes. Guess who always had to muck Claude out, though?
A suitable task for an apprentice, one would have thought,
Severus said. Quite. So it's unfortunate there wasn't one. I was a student, part of the university, as opposed to being apprenticed to a single master.
You know your rules,
Minerva said, starting to recover her composure. One of my first tasks, a memory exercise, was to memorize the entire university rulebook, including all the footnotes and definitions. Has anyone arrived while I was down there?
Not yet, though the apparition wards just signaled that the university media representative has just arrived in Hogsmeade. Albus asked us to fetch you in case it was anyone you knew.
I doubt it was. Other than the Quidditch team, most of my friends were in my own year or a higher one. I found that the younger ones weren't quite as mature, probably because they can't remember the war much.
It's certainly something no one will forget. We'd best go back in now. Did you finish your meal?
Just about. I doubt I'll have a chance to now, so I'll go to the kitchen later if I'm hungry. James led the trio back through the side door into the great hall just as the guests arrived through the main doors. He looked at her. Tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, Agrippa House robes. He started to back away. It was too late. She noticed him. A hex came flying across the hall towards him, and flanked as he was by the two older teachers, there was no real way he could dodge it, and he knew from experience that he wouldn't be able to shield against it. It hit his forearm, and a warm glow spread through his head. Severus took one look at him, blanched, and pulled him back through the doorway.
Are you mad? Why didn't you block it?
Wouldn't have been able to. She's not hugely powerful, and no kind of dueler. But with prank hexes, she could send a single one through any shield. What did she do this time? Minerva stifled a laugh. The two Slytherins glared at her. The new arrival, having folded them in, did laugh. I just adjusted your hair a bit. What did you do? He repeated, plaintively. It's a slightly different color now, she said evasively. Think back to what happened to Draco when he made that comment about my robes, and you have your answer. Bloody hell, James muttered, thinking back to how his other friend had looked with Gryffindor red hair with flickering golden lights. It hadn't been pretty. Please don't tell me. I decided you'd look good in scarlet. Damn! I can't go out like this, Leonie. What are you doing here anyway? University representative, Jamie boy. I stayed on for post-grad work as editor of the magazine. How many times have I told you not to call me that? Professor Dumbledore does, all the time. He's different. If I may interrupt, Severus said, may I inquire into the identity of your, friend? She is not my girlfriend. No way, totally not my type. Who is she, though? She edits the university magazine at the moment. She's a yearmate of mine, and I assume she's about to murder me for not going into a career where I'm likely to be in the public eye. What? I got him to sign over exclusive interview rights to me a couple of years ago. It seemed like a good idea, especially if he'd had the sense to go professional in Quidditch. No offense to you, of course. Right. Now, is there anything we could do about the hair? He asked hopefully. It would do our reputation no good if he walks around like that. Sorry, it's just gotta stay until it wears off, probably a couple of weeks. In his case, it took Draco a month. Evans, come with me. Severus snapped. James rolled his eyes and followed, leaving Leonie in the capable hands of Professor McGonagall. If the man could do anything about the hair, he'd be eternally grateful.